Let's see what Niko House thinks, political commentator, founder of MCSC Network. Niko, welcome back. Your take first on the election. Why did Kamala Harris lose?
Oh, man, there are a whole host of reasons. I think they can be boiled down to the genocide in the economy and really how those two issues are kind of intertwined, right? We can all, I think everybody in the West has some idea that the actions being taken by the United States and NATO abroad are causing problems within the economy back at home. They may not be able to articulate the intricacies of that, but they know it's true. And then there's just the reality of the genocide itself. George, I don't know if you recall, but I said some time ago on this show, no Democrat since Bill Clinton, and that was only one time, no Democrat has won the United States election without Michigan. And yet time and time again, we saw Kamala stumble and trip in Michigan. All the way into that final statement that she made where she said, if you want Trump to win, just say so, otherwise I'm talking. She said that in Detroit, Michigan. And so the Arab voters and the Muslim voters of Dearborn all came out and said, okay, cool, we don't want to make you a liar, so we'll literally vote for Trump to stop you from winning. And that was a tale of the tape as far as the election is concerned. I do echo the sentiments, however, of your last caller, where he said, who knows where we would be at if the Democrats would have won. And I believe that's the case for a whole host of reasons, because don't believe for a second that they didn't try to cheat. I don't believe that. I just believe that sometimes you could try to cheat and you still lose. And I believe that they're not unified. And that's why Kamala wasn't able to come away with the victory this time.
Yeah, and there are some weird things happening, aren't there? We're asked to believe that some states voted heavily for Trump, but then voted for a woke Democrat for senator on the same election night. It may be that the cheating moved down the ticket, as it were. What's your view on that?
That's a possibility. Or there's also situations where in Missouri, for example, where Josh Hawley maintained his seat, Missouri legalized marijuana. They got rid of their pro-abortion ban. They raised the minimum wage to $15 per hour. So a bunch of progressive policies passed in a state that is deeply red. And so it could just be, it's not that people don't like progressive policies. It isn't that they didn't just like Kamala. It isn't that they're sexist. It isn't that they're racist. It's just that they don't like them. They don't like Democrats. They're done with them. They're done with the gaslighting. And then there's the point that a lot of people have made that I, of course, echo as well. Where the hell did those 20 million votes come from last election, and where did they go? And why were so many of them first-time voters, and all of a sudden they disappeared this election? I would like to believe it's the genocide that caused the disappearance of those votes, but I don't believe that. And that during the pandemic, there were a lot of unique ways that you could have voted that didn't really have accountability or a chain of custody that couldn't be done this election. And I just find it weird that those votes appeared last election whenever the voting system was most vulnerable. And now they disappeared this election and Trump won by a landslide with both the electoral and the popular vote.
Yeah, there's only two possibilities about the missing votes. One is that they stayed home because Donald Trump got the same vote this time that he got in 2020. So they didn't go to Trump. He turned in the same vote both times. And they didn't go to anybody else. It's not that they went third party. So they either stayed home or they didn't exist in the first place. And I'm leaning heavily towards the latter. What about you?
No, 100%. There is no way that anyone can believe our election system is legitimate. George, in Ohio, Jill Stein was moved at the last minute because they said that she didn't file, well, they lied at the end. They said it's because she put in a notice to withdraw. That wasn't true. What happened was they said that she declared her vice presidential candidate too late because the deadline was August 12th. She didn't declare it till August 19th. George, the Democrats didn't have a presidential or a VP nominee until August 17th, 2 days before. But this rule did not apply to them, but it applied to Jill Stein. Georgia took Cornel West off of the ballot. New York changed the rules at the last minute to keep Cornel West and Jill Stein off the ballot. So it isn't even like the Green Party or third parties didn't get any momentum this time. It was just that once again, the Democratic Party was able to successfully undercut their momentum through anti-democratic methods. And so it's important that we understand we don't live in a democracy, representative or otherwise, and that's the problem. That's how we keep ending up at this fork in the road with a Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton and a Donald Trump. Those shouldn't be our only options, yet because our democratic process is so undemocratic, those end up being our options. And you can't tell me the voting system itself is somehow an exception to that rule.
Now, they're looking for people to blame. They're blaming black men. They're blaming Latino men. They're blaming white women. They're blaming Kamala Harris. They're blaming George Clooney. Nancy Pelosi is blaming Joe Biden. How is all that going to end up?
I gotta admit, I was kind of surprised that Susan Sarandon's name didn't come up on the news this time around. We're so used to hearing Susan Sarandon's name that it was funny
she got
that
the
she's
blame
the only
last
one who
time,
wasn't
yeah.
blamed this time.
Yeah.
Yes, but and I feel bad for my Latino brothers out there because they acted like y'all didn't even exist before the election. That like the demographic was non-existent, and then all of a sudden it went from y'all don't exist to it's all y'all fault. So I feel for y'all. Welcome to the club. Black men have been getting blamed for elections losses for a very long time. So glad that you get to make it to the party. At the end of the day, what it looks like is that they don't want the Democratic Party wants to do everything except for address the needs of the people. If you acknowledge the problem, George, you then have the responsibility to address and fix that problem. The problem is the economy. The problem is that they gaslighted people for a long time, not just the last 4 years, but really for the last 8 years and probably a little bit longer than that. The problem is that they could have brought charges against Donald Trump for legitimate reasons regarding war crimes. They chose not to. They charged to Trump up false charges, weaponize the government against him, and then act like they're afraid he's going to do the same thing to them that they did to him. They don't want to address the working class issues. They don't want to address inflation. They don't want to address increased interest rates. They don't want to address the fact that they got caught lying about unemployment. If you acknowledge the reality of the working class voter, if you acknowledge the genocide, if you acknowledge how AIPAC had a huge influence in a way that they weren't expecting, and I mean that AIPAC caused the Democracy election. They didn't win it for them. If you acknowledge all that, then you have to fix it. Because if you don't, then you're just really you're really just throwing the middle finger up to the working class, and it's obvious. So they're going to blame everything but the truth. But because if they acknowledge the truth, then they have to fix it and address it, and they are not willing to do that right now.
What is going to happen now? He's got 70 days left, Joe Biden. I don't know if he knows that. None of us know whether or not he knows anything at all. But it's a dangerous period, isn't it? He's already, as administration is, trying to kick over more billions into a war which the next president, who takes over on January 20th, has already said must stop. And yet more American taxpayers' money is going to be poured into the maw of that. But other dangerous things could happen in the Persian Gulf, in the Levant, in the Israel-Palestine, Israel-Lebanon, Israel-Syria, where remarkable bombing attacks were made, in Damascus this very afternoon. This Biden administration ain't done killing yet, is it?
No, and I got to tell you, you want to talk about, missing the point, right? You just lost an election because you kept taking money from the American people and allocating it in places that not only don't help the American people, but are actively hurting the economy in which the American people live in. And so to respond to that, you send $6 billion more to neo-Nazis in a losing war effort. Just because you don't want Trump to be able to stop that, the aid once he gets in power, and you're bypassing Congress to do it, and the Democrats aren't even saying anything about it. And let it be known, the Republicans don't seem to be saying much about it either. So it's just, they hate the working class people. That's the only way I can think of to put it at this point, George. It's like they hate the working class people. And you're right, because now Joe Biden And I guess more importantly, the people who are actually running his administration, because we know at this point it ain't Joe Biden running it. The people that are running Joe Biden's administration know, well, we don't got no consequences for the next 70 days. So let's go ahead and ramp it up to such a degree that Trump will be put in a compromised situation the moment he gets in office, and anything positive that he at least attempts to do will be undercut by the actions of the Democratic Party before he gets out, and by the war machine before he gets out. Because don't get it twisted. I know that Trump is a part of the war machine in a lot of ways, but once again, it's his unpredictability that causes discombobulation, which often exposes a system and puts the system in a compromised position as far as the perspective of the rest of the world and how they view some of these actions, right? Like people are gonna talk about some of the stuff that's going on overseas a lot more now. Why? Because Trump is in office. So we'll see how he reacts to that. But I do believe that the Democrats believe that they are in a almost like a free period, like a free zone where they can get away with anything they want, because now they don't have to worry about electoral consequences since everything is over. The Republicans have the governorships, they have the Senate, they have the House, they have the White House, and they have the Supreme Court. So it's like, what could go wrong for us?
Now, finally, Niko, we're going to mark Donald Trump's report card every week. Don't get me wrong on that. I see from our poll this evening, which is a very big one, that most people do not think that Trump is going to make America great again. A very clear majority on that. Our previous guest, Fiorella Isabel, was deeply skeptical as to what the Trump administration will be like. I'll admit I'm slightly more optimistic than that. But if I was marking his report card this week, I'd say he's done really very well. In just 3 days, he's declared for freedom of speech, the sacred nature of the First Amendment, the unacceptability of big tech dictatorship, the unacceptability of state-directed big tech dictatorship. He's called Zelensky and told them that the game is up, and he's booted Pompeo's formerly fat ass right out of the cabinet before he even got in it. That's not bad in 3 days.
A little bit worried, I'm not going to lie. We all thought that Pompeo was the first in line. Ben Shapiro's reporting that. Even whenever Trump invited Pompeo to speak at his rally, we thought that. But you're right. It looks like he might, once again, we've had this conversation before, he might be responding to his audience. He might be responding to his base, because whenever his base found out Pompeo might be back in the door, they responded accordingly. So this is one of the things about Trump. He don't love nothing more than his ego. And for his ego to be satisfied, his base has to love him. And that can sometimes yield good results for us. Am I hopeful that he'll make America great? No, not necessarily. However, you can't get worse than genocide in World War III, George. It isn't that hard to be better than Joe Biden. That's my point. You know what I'm saying? It's not that difficult.
My point too, exactly. Niko House, you're a star. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Will Trump make America great again, yes or no? You've got half an hour left to vote. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls right up to Gayatri's social media roundup. Stay tuned.